hunters, fishermen, and travelers going towards Bakersfield. And so there was a lot of activity there. And I think later the Piedra Blanca Trail tied the Twin Forks into, and Piedra Blanca Camp into Lions Camp. That came later. But the story I want to tell you about, though, is when Al West was district ranger, the Boy Scouts of America had a 50-mile hike. And so this hike that they wanted ended at Beaver Camp, but there was no trail from Lions Camp to Beaver Camp. And that was the end leg of this trail. And so we were in the mode of constructing a new trail out of the watershed. 69 flood, I guess, took out what existed as a trail going through the bottom, the canyon bottom, but it wasn't really a trail. And so they wanted to locate a trail on higher ground out of the water, the floodplain. And so I built this trail, and while we were there, we were camping at Rainbow Ranch. Across the river, there's a big flat. And my wife was getting ready to have a baby about that time, part of that time, and so I wasn't staying there every night, but the trail crew was. And so they were telling me about this lantern. Someone walked around with a lantern in the middle of the night out there, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and they saw it at least 2 nights in a row. And I didn't know any history about that place, and we never had any trouble in there. And later, one of the caretakers told me there had been other people saying that they saw a lantern out there in the middle of the meadow at night. And so I actually didn't see it, but the trail crew saw it. But what I did see, after I retired and I was up there and I was waiting for the owner to come, she lived down in the LA area, the caretakers of the ranch walked up to check the water level in the water tank, and there was a man, husband and wife. And as they went up there, I could see them up there, but there was 2 other people, so there's a total of 4 people up there, and they're all waving down. I told my wife, she was with me, and I said, well, they must be here. And they stopped and walked up to the water tank with them. And so I was going to meet with her when she got down, but when they came down, there was only 2 people. And as it turned out, there wasn't anyone else up there with them, but my wife and I both distinctly saw 4 people up there waving their hands. And while we were waiting in the cabin, I caught a glimpse of someone looking out the big window towards the meadow. I didn't stare at them because I thought they were a guest. And my wife saw them, and it ended up being there was no one in that cabin whatsoever. And so it was quite interesting. But the owner, I don't remember her name. She's had some Indians come up, and they suggested that it was a what do you call it, Martha?
Vortex.
A vortex, yeah, the Pacific vortex, and it had a certain unusual occurrences that would happen there. And you know, since I've been up there, and I know that it's privately owned, but I'm just surprised that no one else has ever talked anything about the mysterious things that went on at that Rainbow Ranch.
Yes. You know, I wouldn't tell this anywhere else except I just heard this story. But in 68 or 69, my first episode of seeing what I called my health was in Rose Valley, and this thing ran into our fire circle and ran out again. And, you know, I might have been drunk on drugs. I don't know. But in Rose Valley was my first elf.
How can you describe to me the faces of that were looking down at you? Because that was a great
From
description.
Rainbow Ranch, tank is about 200 yards away. And so you just see figures up there. It's a little ways away. But the man-woman caretakers over there, they didn't believe in ghosts. And he was there by himself one day, and he heard these cowboys down at the river talking. He could see the horses down tied to a tree by a sandbar. There's only one good swimming hole down there. And so he went down there to chase them away. And he was up above them. The road going into the place goes up the slope, so you're kind of looking down on the area. And he could physically see them, he could hear them, but when he got down there was no one there. And that really spooked him because he's there by himself.
Yeah, they say never go hiking alone. Mike Vaughn, ever see anything spooky in the backcountry? No?
I never did any drugs or alcohol.
So what are you saying about Richard Box there?
Rick?
No, I don't have any.
You know what, Rick's gonna plead the fifth on that. I haven't seen anything quite so supernatural, and now that I think about it, I wish I'd have brought a photo, but when I was 14, and my brother was 24, and he was constantly dragging me around the Los Padres, for 15-mile days and just killing his little brother. We did a 3-day trip from what was Lion Camp. We went from Lion Camp to the hot springs in one day. All I remember is lying down to sleep. And then we went hot springs to about West Fork on the full 20 West 14 Devil's Gate Trail. And then we went from West Fork through Devil's Gate, through Mr. Ventry's property, got yelled at by him, and then went down Grand Avenue and got in the old truck that we'd hidden in the orchards and took off. On the second day, though, we went a little further than West Fork than we had planned, because when we got to the main, although the camp had been abandoned or removed in 1974, I think, as part of the big fiscal crunch. But the camp was still being used by people. There were a lot of fire rigs there. Fishing was pretty good back then. We got there and there was this big, that I can only describe, for lack of a better word, satanic pyre there. There was a big oblong ring of rocks that was about 12 feet, or maybe 10 feet long. There were a bunch of stakes with all these different little animal skulls on the top. And I wish I brought the picture. I'll have to send it to you later, Perry. But there were all these little, they must have been like gophers or rabbits or bats or possums or small little like mammal-style skulls, and just a ring of them, around, and then all these weird, I don't know, picto something grams on little, river-washed cobbles. And, and I'm not even sure I was 14, but I was like, oh, Billy, can we camp somewhere else? And he said, yeah, we're gonna keep going. So we ended up just, finding a little sandbar further down, but that was bad juju.
You want to treat us to some old structure photos?
Yeah, I mean, they're not in any particular order, but
Okay.
I love old structures. Let's see, little G, can you go to 64? I'm sorry, Grace. Go to slide 64. And then obviously, I invite anybody to provide color commentary on any of these things. Thorn Point Lookout, for anybody who hasn't visited, and it's in the Sespe Wilderness, and it was built in 1934 as part of the New Deal and the WPA. They were putting all the kids to work, and they built a bunch of these towers. The Thorn Point Lookout is at the appropriately named Thorn Point, which is on the other side of the Sespe from Lion Camp in this area. It's only a 3.5-mile hike in from Thorn Meadow Campground, and the first mile is fairly level, so that last 2.5 miles is a hoof. You gain not quite 2,000 feet getting up there, and you can feel it. But one of the reasons I really like this site is it's one of the last lookouts that's not, falling into disrepair or hasn't collapsed in on itself. And I think part of that is its general inaccessibility. People can't drive up to it like they can Fraser Mountain and shoot it up or make a mess, or they can't drive to it like they can Leon Peak. And it also, you see in the foreground here, there's a little cabin, and that's the Aircraft Warning Service cabin after Pearl Harbor. And the forest was closed for a few years during the war, but right after Pearl Harbor, they built these little cabins at the lookouts, and the lookouts were pressed into service for the plane spotters instead of just for fire suppression. So they would man the lookout 24 hours a day, 12-hour shifts. When you were off shift, you lived in a little cabin down below.
Guard stations,
Yeah.
they're called guard stations,
Well, there's guard stations and were these also called? Okay.
I think so.
I am humble before Ranger Bottoms, and I will take that at face value. And if you go one more slide down, that's a view of the cabin down below there. And this is the last aircraft warning service cabin / guard station that's still standing, that you can still visit. All the other ones have collapsed or otherwise been blown over by the wind or burned or vandalized or shot up or
There's one more,
in these districts.
not this district.
Oh, I meant the Ojai area, but yeah. Actually, you're right, there's a couple more. The one at Salisbury Trail.
Yes.
That one's great, what they call the Jackson Cabin. They're just south of Montgomery Trail as you're looking down into the Sisquoc Drainage, which is actually a completely different, extremely unique
It was
design.
moved there.
Yeah, it used to be on the top of Salisbury Trail. And then you just go ahead and page down here and there's the old wood routed sign showing the elevation. We'll skip this so we don't freak out your machine. Okay. That was a video tour of it, but the machine is known to choke on that tour. Maybe at the end we can visit it. So this is a photo, on the right is the lookout tower in 1940, June of 1940. And on the left is a photo from roughly the same spot that I took in September of 2013, showing the difference in condition. You can see underneath on the older photos where the outhouse used to be. And it's no longer there in the current photo, but pre-December 41, they didn't have the little guard station cabin. So it's not shown there, but you can see it there on the left. Go ahead. Some of the other, this is the interior of the Thorn Point lookout. Perry, I think one of these photos is one that you took when you were there. Yeah, you can still see it went out of service, I'm going to say in the late 70s, but then was used again by Fish and Wildlife or Department of Fish and Game or whatever you want to call it now, for their condor observations, because